Welcome back to another episode of Lions Daily, man. We are live and we are officially, actually, I don't know. I didn't look this up before, but we're only a couple weeks out from training camp, okay? We're not that far away from training camp. So today we are beginning the process throughout this entire week. The plan is this entire week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're going to be previewing the training camp battles, but specifically, not just the battles, but the entire positional groups. All right, so we're going to break this into 3 different sections so that we can cover everything. I think we're going to be good time-wise here. Okay, I don't think that's going to be an issue. We'll see, though. Maybe it is. I don't think it will be. We're going to hit on every positional group for the Lions heading into training camp, talk about maybe the dark horses to make the team. Who do we think are locks going in? Who are the guys that are truly on the bubble? Who's right outside looking in? What are the numbers game looking like? Health? Like, there's so much that goes into this. So I don't want to waste too much time, but we got a couple positional groups we're going to hit on today. As you've seen by the title, front 7, which means defensive line plus linebackers, as well as the receiver room. We're going to go both sides of the ball. I think, well, for 2 of the 3. The last one will be the same side of the ball, but this will allow us to hit on every positional group. We'll do them in the same video. Plus, I think just doing one positional group is doing a little bit too much. All right, so we're just going to do a couple at a time. We'll see how this goes. Let's jump right into it. Let's waste no time. I got some clips, okay, so we're prepared with that. But let's jump right into it. We're going to start this thing off, of course, on the front 7, and we're going to go into let's go to the back of the front 7, and we'll work our way forward. We're going to start with that linebacker position first for the Lions here. Now, there may be some, differences in like where people think each player plays. I guess, for example, like last year, Agude was listed as a linebacker, but he played defensive end for us, so we have him with the defensive line. But for the most part, this is what the linebacker room is looking like. As of now, changes will be made. New guys will be brought in, maybe not to the linebacker position group, but at position groups, things will happen. But for now, this is what we're looking like throughout the roster for this linebacker position. Unless something crazy happens, maybe like a safety goes a linebacker or something. This is what we're looking at. Now, there's going to be some color coding with this, which I will mention as we go through this to really kind of highlight some things for linebacker. It's pretty straightforward, though. The purple means that the player was there last year. All right, so that's the key. If it's purple, the player was on the roster last season. There are a lot of changes that I didn't even realize until I started putting this together. I'm like, there's a lot of guys that are like that made. I shouldn't say were on the roster. Guys that made the initial 53 that aren't even in competition this year. They're not even here this year. There's a pretty healthy amount of changes at every positional group, but purple are guys that made it through the initial 53 last year. Now, that doesn't necessarily, it's purple. I don't know what color it is, okay? I thought it was purple, but I don't even know if I actually have a purple. Plus, my screen's a little bit orange, so I can't completely tell. All right, whatever that color is that isn't yellow and not white, that means that they were on the 53 to begin last season, okay? So, a lot of changes, a lot of different positional groups. Let's start with the guys that I'm going to consider locks. Now, the Alex Anzalone one has a question mark because, well, that one's pretty straightforward. We don't know what's going on with Alex. We don't know if he's going to show up for the Lions. We know that he wants to get paid, so we'll have to just wait and see what happens throughout that whole situation. But regardless, if he is playing and he is under contract, the guy is not going to get cut. So I'm pretty confident Alex Anzalone maroon. Okay, we can rock with maroon. Burgundy, stop it. I don't. You making that up, MJ? We can rock with maroon. All right, I don't think burgundy's a real color. No. All right, no. So Alex Anzalone, he's going to be a lock to make this team. As long as he shows up on our end, he's going to be a lock to make this team. I'm also going to throw Malcolm Rodriguez. Now, Malcolm actually was on the 53, the initial 53 last year. I just have him highlighted in yellow because the difference with Malcolm is the yellow highlighting is to indicate the injury. And for a guy like Rodriguez, it's pretty significant, right? We know that he's going to miss the beginning of the year. So we'll say that Malcolm Rodriguez, highlight him in yellow. We know the Lions are going to have a couple of options when it comes to players like this. Now, for example, the Lions can bring him through the 53-man roster, place him on IR once they get through the 53. That way they're not out for the season. But then at that time, they'll have to miss at least 4 weeks. With Malcolm, that's not going to be a problem. The only thing is you're keeping a player on the 53 that's not available to begin the year. However, there are now essentially like 2 exceptions to that. So you can have players that actually don't make the 53, but they go on IR immediately that can be eligible to return during the season. That way they're not taking up a roster spot, but I believe you only can do that with 2 players. So maybe he's one of those 2 because you're pretty confident that he's going to get through. You don't really need to see anything because you're not going to see anything. So outside of just him progressing. Malcolm Rodriguez, I'm also going to consider him a lock. Jack Campbell, that's a lock. Derek Barnes just got a 3-year deal. That's a lock. But after that, everything becomes wide open. And to me, this is one of the more fascinating positional groups in terms of competition heading into training camp this year. And I'm going to go, here's how I'm looking at it, right? Next in are kind of the guys that I feel like are next up. That I'm like, all right, this would be the next group of guys that I'd feel most confident about that would slide their way in. You can see last year we kept 6 linebackers. That doesn't mean it's going to be the same list this year, but it can be an indicator of where things could trend. Last year we kept 6, so that gives you 4, but 1 is going to miss some time. So it definitely feels like there's a real possibility to have 3 of these spots open. Remember, though, the Lions don't typically force players into positions just to fill out numbers. We've seen them come in without kickers. We've seen them come in like last year. They had 4 receivers when they came in. Like they are not beholden to, hey, we need this many players, so we're just going to force guys in just to fill this number. They'll just cut it and be light at that positional group and then ultimately go find somebody else. They've had no issue with doing that. But there's real openings to the spot, especially knowing that Malcolm's likely going to miss some time. However, the guy that I want to focus on here is going to go to the bubble because we haven't talked about him enough. But the more that I watch, because I don't think we've given this guy enough attention, at least I haven't given enough attention personally. I don't want to say we, I haven't. And I want to give him some attention today. The guy that I want to focus on is in the bubble category, and it's going to be Ezekiel Turner, the 29-year-old linebacker. So typically, you know, I'm kind of on the mindset like, yeah, Ezekiel Turner wasn't great last season. He's probably not going to make the team. Throw him in bubble. That was the easy one. But I got to be honest with you. Ezekiel Turner does intrigue me heading into this year. Understanding that Malcolm's going to be missing some time to get things started this year, and then just going back and you see the ups and downs, and every player had inconsistencies last year within that mix. But one guy, man, he did show like, okay, there is some 3-level ability to his game, was Ezekiel Turner. He showed a little bit as a rusher, not that I want him to just put his hand in the dirt and rush guys, but he showed a little bit in terms of he's got some aggression to him. He's pretty nice at playing run to pass. He has some really good play speed, which can allow him to transition to rushing the passer. As a run defender, he was much better than I remember. Now, he's not overly stout, so you can watch him kind of get sealed off, ran out of plays, just knocked over by guys at the second level when linemen carry up to the second level when they climb to him. But he did show like better hand usage than I expected. He was pretty twitchy as a shed piece. And then in coverage, where it was the most messy, we always knew that, like, okay, this guy looks like he has the athleticism, like this should work in coverage, but things like this, the awareness was kind of messy, right? We'd see plays where he just didn't look overly fluid. As well as he ran, he just didn't look that fluid in coverage like ever to me. He felt like he was very focused on, I got to maintain body control here. Let me not, fall over my skis a little bit, but he was very physical, of course, underneath, but he didn't feel overly fluid. However, when you go back and watch it, you're like, okay, it was messy. Some of it did tie back to awareness, maybe some of the lack of fluidity. But in terms of, like, can he get to his spot? Can he chase running backs and tight ends underneath? I actually did feel pretty good about that walking away from it. Like, this is going to be a big step for him, having to make it look a little bit more consistent in coverage. But athletically, talent-wise, just having the athleticism to do it, I would say Ezekiel Turner is as good as anybody within this group, so especially without Malcolm, who added a lot there. We know special teams is going to play a major role in this well, but if we're just specifically thinking about defense, the play speed at which he brought, the ability to recognize run schemes, play really fast within his first step, he got to where he needed to be very quickly. He got to where he needed to be in a hurry as a run defender. Overall, it was just some lack of awareness at times that I felt became the biggest issue. And I don't think he's going to be a big-time rusher, and he is a little bit undersized, but he honestly felt like he made it work a little bit. So, to me, I'm going to say that Ezekiel Turner is the one guy that feels like he could really shake everything up here. Now, we talked a little bit about Deron Gilbert in our last show last week as kind of the, what do we call him, a headline player that would surprise and make this team. Obviously, I'm watching to see what his body type comes back as. Turner seemed like he could actually make it work. I wonder a little bit about Deron Gilbert. There's a very big difference there. Ezekiel Turner's 29 years old. I mean, this is a vet in the NFL. Deron Gilbert is young. He's going into year 2 as an undrafted free agent. So 2 very different timelines potentially here. Turner feels like he'd have to be a legitimate step ahead of these other guys to make the team at this point. But I'm not going to count it out because I do think this is a pretty close battle across the board. Speaking of, let me pull this back up. The next in category, I think all 3 of these guys could be in. Like, I really do feel like there is kind of a gap between these next few here, especially with the situations that we're dealing with. Grant Stewart signed a 1-year deal. It's not overly expensive, but I do think Grant Stewart's going to make the team. I think there's flexibility in this game. Special teams, I think, is going to carry and lead the way for him. But we've watched him. He does remind me a little bit of Malcolm Rodriguez in just kind of his play style, and I think that he'll fit what they're looking for. Trevor Nowatzki is another super interesting one because of what he brought last year. His flexibility was huge. He got to a point last season where he's playing on the ball. He actually had 17 pressures this past year. I felt like he got a little bit better at that throughout the entirety of the season. 11 solo tackles this past year. He was kind of utilized, especially early, as like a, third down piece that can drop into coverage, get to his spots. It was like, okay, that's kind of his role, right? He can kind of get where he needs to be. I don't know if I want to put him in man that often, but he moves in space pretty well. He covers a lot of ground, and he showed, I think, a little bit more fluidity than Ezekiel Turner there. So the flexibility was huge for Trevor Nowatzki, speed and zone depth that he could create specifically. As a run defender, as a tackler, I always like him. He's a nice finisher, closes to the football pretty darn well. I just wonder about what's actually the best spot for him. Can he live between the tackles? Does he have the short area quickness, the reactiveness that Ezekiel Turner has to get where he needs to be as fast as he needs to be there? Does he have the size and the build to live on the line of scrimmage? I mean, right now he's kind of our backup to Derek Barnes, it feels like, so I think that gives him a nod. But again, special teams going to have to play into this. The Lions actually didn't have him on the 53. They added him right after the cuts this past season, and they brought him in after the initial 53 was noted. So Trevor Nowatzki, he's an exciting one. Played 330 snaps for Lions last year. And then, yes, Anthony Pittman. Now, Anthony Pittman gets utilized in a lot of specific ways on special teams. Anthony Pittman is the guy that, as a special teams coordinator, say you're on kickoff return team, you would circle Anthony Pittman as, okay, maybe this is the guy that we double. Now, the Lions do a lot of creative things with him. Dave Phipp uses him in a lot of creative ways to get this guy opportunities, a lot of times using him as a puller on kickoff coverage where he's wrapping himself around. He's the guy that they want to get free. He's the guy that creates an absolute log jam on kick coverage specifically, where they'll wrap him around. He's the guy that, again, teams have to emphasize with, and they use him in creative ways to kind of be the guy that creates the mess. Okay, he's got the body type for it. He's got the physicality for it. Defensively, it wasn't pretty this past year when he came in. I thought that it would be exciting to put him on the ball. They tried it. I didn't think it worked that well, but there was such a small sample size. We just didn't get a great sense of that. So again, yeah, that's going to lead him going forward. You wonder if you want to consider him more of, I almost want to consider him more of just like a true defensive end than anything. That's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. I think that could actually be the best transition. Everybody else feels, yeah, they're a linebacker. He might be more so looked at as a DN. The problem that I'm just dealing with right now is, depending on what you want from that positional group, you're not getting, Anthony Pittman's not going to bring to the table what Ezekiel Turner brings to the table. He's not going to bring what Deron Gilbert brings to the table. He's not going to me, he brings the closest to what Trevor Nowatzki brings, and I don't think he even brings that. He doesn't move as well in space as Trevor Nowatzki does. So I think he brings something significantly different than everybody else to this room, which could be a positive. I think it could be a real negative this year because of how deep the defensive line actually is. And I think that's the problem that we're dealing with here. So I think you could actually maybe consider him more so on the defensive line battle if you wanted to. Special teams going to have to carry a lot of weight. And if no one stands out, that could be the thing that gives him over the top. But definitely a special team spot wouldn't be terrible here. Wouldn't be terrible to bring him on in on a special team spot if that's, or not special teams, a practice squad spot if that's possible. Okay, so that's the linebacker position. Let's go on to the next one here. And we can always kind of revisit these and bounce back a little bit. But let's go and I want to go to the defensive line. That way we stay within these positional groups here. Let's go here next. The defensive line is fun. The defensive line is a lot of fun. Okay, so if we go to this, I mean, man, there's some dogs here. Okay, there's some dogs here. First off, we go to the locks. Aiden Hutchinson, DJ Reader. Again, we talked about kind of the decisions you have to make with some of these injuries. Liam McNeil is a good example of that. He's dealing with the ACL tear. So based on that, could be like week 10 plus, if we're looking at it from a conservative, like, all right, this thing's going to be about, 11 months to a year, if we're taking that kind of approach. Professional athlete, I don't know that it's actually going to take that long. I'm not a professional athlete, but I could see it being a lot faster depending on, how he had his surgery, if he had it from his own body, if his body accepted that, which we didn't hear anything like it didn't. So he could be a little bit sooner than that, but regardless, he's not going to be ready for the beginning of the season. So let's not even count Liam McNeil. I don't know how they're going to do it. Are they going to put him on IR? Are they going to bring him through the 53 and then just put him on IR afterwards? How are they going to do it? I'm not sure. They're going to use one of those spots. Marcus Davenport, I would consider him a lock. They've already talked very highly of him. It's truly just him staying healthy throughout the regular season. But making through the 53, I'm pretty confident he'll be there unless, unfortunately, something happens before then. Tyleik Williams. Now, the blue here, this is where we start to get draft picks. If they're highlighting blue, they were draft picks. So Tyleik Williams. Levi also made the 53 this past season, came back on the one-year deal. You could say about that contract, maybe there's a world he doesn't make the team, but not this year. To me, not this year. Like, one, I think he's going to be awesome this season. Two, I think he's going to get a big contract out of this year. And we also need him this year with these injuries that we're talking about. So, especially depending on Mekhi Wingo, which we go to Mekhi Wingo, torn meniscus this past season. Now, he could be back early this season, right? There's a chance that we see him. We haven't got a ton of updates because we haven't just been around it, right? We haven't heard really much from anybody here because things are just dead right now. But depending on where he can get to, like it's a much shorter term injury in theory. He's also, according to his defensive line coach, he's getting to the spot where he's trying to get back to that, pre-explosiveness that he had. And that was back in March when he talked about Mekhi Wingo, end of March. So there's a chance that he's, I don't know, like back end of training camp, kind of like he's getting rolling. He'll probably be working with trainers, but he could get rolling, man. There is a world in which he's rolling early this season. So I don't want to throw him into any bucket specifically. We'll just have to see how that plays out. We got Roy Lopez. Now, again, one-year deal. Maybe you can make the case he's not. Again, these are more so my perspective. if I was not just looking at it from how I felt about it, you could put a guy like Roy Lopez maybe as like a next in piece, but not me. I think Roy Lopez is too valuable for what we need this year. I think he's a lock to make the team. Maybe there's a world in which Chris Smith is awesome, and it's like, actually, we should have just did Chris Smith. Like, I don't think it's going to happen, but maybe. Ahmed Hassanin, I considered putting him in next in. I really did, based on where he was taken in the draft. But I think, again, from a depth perspective, I don't really see a world in which he's cut. I don't want to go to the aspect of like a Giovanni Manu and how far away they thought that was, but I think they're going to be willing to say that this is going to take a minute. Like, I don't think they're going to be like, man, it's not great right now, we might have to cut. Like, I don't think they're going to be there, and I don't think unless they go sign somebody that comes available, I don't know that they actually have a name that's going to press him out of a spot. I don't know that there's a guy that's like, man, he's so far up in front of Ahmed, and that's just assuming that he's not rolling early. I don't think that guy's on the roster right now. So I think Ahmed's going to be a lock. And if we just consider those guys, let's take Aleem out of the picture. That's 8 players. That's 8 players that I would consider locks on the team for the defensive line. The Lions only kept 9 last year. And again, we could throw Michael Pittman into this conversation as a bubble player. So that's where we're at with this. The next in, Josh Paschal for me. He's exciting this season as well, because if you look at it, if you go through those names there, the Lions from a defensive end depth perspective could be a little bit lighter, right? You have Hutchinson, you have Davenport, Levi partly, kind of Mekhi Wingo, but they used him a lot as an interior player this last year. So a guy like Josh Paschal has a real valuable role if he can earn it, as well as Muhammad. Those are 2 guys that, for limited roster spots, I mean, there's a real shot that they keep one of these guys. Let's say they keep 2. Let's say they keep 2, which is very possible. They only keep 2 of everybody from next in over. They only keep 2 players on this entire list, and that's not including anybody else that they could potentially bring in here. Man, the battle is real. There's not a lot of spots, and there's a lot of battle taking place. Muhammad could be in a good spot because of his position. I throw Miles Adams here. I think he's a little bit ahead of the bubble for me. One, I think he's a great scheme fit. I think last year he gave a lot of juice to this team. He gave them interior rush, which is very difficult to find. I think Miles Adams is in a interesting spot coming into the year. The problem for him, again, is he's not going to jump Tyleek. He's not going to jump Roy Lopez. Aleem McNeil's injury could help him, depending on where Wingo's at. If Wingo's a little bit further out and you're like, just give it a little bit of time for Wingo, if that's the case, that helps a guy like Miles Adams. We'll throw Pat O'Connor in here as well because, again, I think the connection, not saying it gives him anything, but I think the connection does matter. He played a significant amount of snaps. He actually did play a majority of the snaps on the interior. So, again, while there's flexibility to look at him as a DN, they didn't really view him as a DN this past season. They viewed him as an interior piece. Does that change? Maybe, but the flexibility's there. And then, of course, Broderick Martin, who's still on his rookie contract. It's just tough based on numbers, like truly here. Like if Miles Adams got the nod, I could see Broderick Martin being out. But looking at that entire list, he is a very significant, like that's your true nose. Like everybody on this, right, like he's a true nose tackle. His competition is the Chris Smiths. His competition is the Raequan Williams. So it's and Raequan Williams played as a 3-4 DN with Carolina in the preseason a couple of years ago. So he's very uniquely kind of in his own world here and what he is, which is why he's interesting. On the bubble side of things, I want to just focus on a specific player here. I want to go to Mitchell Agude. I don't think we've given a ton of attention to Mitchell Agude potentially making the team specifically this season. So let me drop this off the screen really quickly. Mitchell Agude, he's interesting. He didn't play much this past. I think he played 40 snaps this past year, played in like 2 games, 17 snaps, 13 snaps, that kind of thing. He didn't play a lot this past year, but he did show a little bit as a rusher, right? And I was a little bit surprised. Like he's pretty powerful in the upper body. He's pretty quick to get to where he needs to be. He doesn't feel overly rangy as a run defender. I don't know how much leverage he can actually create, but he's pretty powerful as you see here. There's a little bit of an ability to drop his weight a little bit as a run defender. I think he's a very interesting piece because you just wonder if like he can get to a point where he has a move that he can go to. He kind of had like that skip move that he would use as a rusher this past season that felt like it had some success. I just wonder if he can expand upon that, maybe add something else. But specifically, can he just be good enough there where something shines in his game? Maybe that's the element that shines. Again, we kind of looked at him as a backer, and then last year he just became like a full-time D end. Does he change his body type a little bit to really fit into that role? Mitchell Agude is fascinating to me because he has a touch of bend, dropping weight, can flatten the arc a little bit. He squeezes on the backside. He gets to where he's supposed to be quickly. I just don't think he processes the full picture incredibly well, which is a problem. Doesn't play with a ton of leverage. He doesn't seem to have a great feel for the scheme, so he could be a little bit misplaced in where he's actually going on the play, which tends to be an issue. I just wonder because I feel like him going, being a full-time DN that didn't play a ton of snaps, obviously he's in a tough spot to make the team. But this is the year where you take that jump, right? You kind of know what you are. You know how they want to use you. Let's see if you can take that jump. And I don't want to call it a simplified role, but like, dude, you're playing on the line. Get after it. Like, can we get more consistent with that rush move? Because if you can, maybe there's something that stands out. Maybe there's something that separates you from the rest of this group. And like, you have a way to win. Maybe that's what it is. Outside of that, though, obviously Keith Cooper, he came in, tried out, UDFA signing. I like Keith Cooper. Raequan Williams is the other player I want to spotlight. Another guy that we haven't talked about a lot because we haven't seen him in a few years. Like, we haven't seen him since the 2023 preseason. So it's very understandable that we haven't talked a lot about Raequan. But the scheme fit, like Miles Adams, to me, is fascinating. Run defenders where he's been dominant. Doesn't bring a ton of juice as a rusher. That's why I gave Miles Adams the edge. Also, he's already been here, which makes sense. But he was a very effective run defender. He was playing with the first unit with Carolina a couple of years ago. So he was fully in the mix. And we see he's tough as heck. He was a very high energy, kind of like effort pass rush piece, which is how he won a little bit. He was able to find some stoutness, hold his ground. He didn't feel overly quick, or his get off didn't feel fantastic, but he had enough to kind of get himself and fight himself to settle him down, not get pushed out of the plays. Again, find effort wins as a pass rush artist if there's anything there. Fascinating pickup. I think that he's much more on the bubble, but I like the fit. And again, he plays into kind of when's Mekhi Wingo going to be available? How does that affect everything here? So we'll just have to see how that all shakes out. Okay, that's the defensive line room. Again, Nate Lynn is interesting too because you're just talking about some rushers. We'll leave that there. Dude, I think it's a great room because I feel like there's a lot of knowns, which is great. We haven't always had. I feel like there's a lot of knowns. Health is the question, but in terms of like what they can bring, I think there's a lot of knowns. The final position group, though, we got to talk about a little bit here, and this one won't take as long. We got to go to the receiver room. Going to the receiver room, we kept 4 last year, which blew my mind. I forgot. We only kept 4. Well, Tim Patrick was added afterwards, so that does make some sense. But the locks of this one, to me, are kind of straightforward. I honestly feel like the first 5 I put here, you could just consider locks. I didn't want to do that because I wanted to add some juice to this conversation because I think there is something to be, here. And it's not even as much of like, okay, this guy makes the team over this guy, and that's why he's not considered a lock. It's more so about the other positions. Like, when you think about how many guys at defensive line there are, I think I just touched on a couple players that aren't including Al-Quadin Muhammad. I think he is in a fantastic spot to make this team because Muhammad brings defensive end depth, which we need. He got much better as a run defender, so he improved last year. And he, to me, was legitimately – you can make the case even including Josh Paschal. Now, I want to see Paschal used more in the interior, but that's not as an edge rusher. Muhammad is the best rusher from next in on. Like, out of everybody here, he is hands down the best rusher, depending on Nate Lynn. So because of that, I think Muhammad's in a strong spot. Well, let's say they keep Muhammad, they keep Paschal. If one of these interior, Miles Adams, maybe they want to go with Roderick Martin again, maybe Raequan does the thing. Like, you get to a point where it's like they just might go thin on receiver again. I'm not saying they should, but they could. I think it's more about the other groups than actually receiver because I feel good about these receivers. It's just like, does a guy at defensive line just make more sense understanding your injuries? And you're like, I'm going to keep that. We'll figure it out at receiver. We're just going to go a touch later. We're only going to keep 5. We're not going to keep all 6 or, like something like that. So we know the 3 locks, St. Brown, J-Mo. I'm going to throw Tesla because he was a 3rd-round pick, not Lovett because he was an A2 pick. Like, they're not cutting Tesla. The dude could look atrocious. They're not cutting him. He won't look atrocious, but he could. Legit, like, they won't cut that guy. I'm going to say next in Tim Patrick, Khalif Lovett. Raymond, to me, is the closest to being a lock. The Lovett thing adds intrigue because, again, like, let's say they were like, we need this extra spot. We're going to keep 5. So Dominic Lovett versus Raymond, that's who we're going to make the decision on here. Well, then there is a legitimate battle, and Lovett does enough on special teams where I think he's going to thrive on special teams. Like, that's going to be his standout trait more so than Tesla. I think he's going to be great on special teams. He's going to be a really good gunner if you want to use him there, and he separates like crazy just like Khalif does. It's just, can he add the reliability in his hands? Does he have that? Khalif Raymond, where he's at on his contract, there could be something up in the air, but man, he's so good for us. Like, anytime we call upon him, it works. I don't want to see Khalif Raymond get cut. And then Tim Patrick was, again, perfect fit for this offense. Really didn't miss a beat for us. And he had a stretch last season where he was dominant. It just worked. Goff doesn't do a lot off script, but last year for the first time, we kind of felt Goff like, I'm going to go do some things. Like, I don't need to stay. Let me go make something happen. And the recipient a lot of times was Tim Patrick. Like, he brought that out of him, that trust level that built very quickly, which doesn't always happen. But with Patrick, it was. It was like immediate. All right, he trusts this guy. This works. So for that reason, I think it's going to be hard to see a world in which Tim Patrick gets cut because I don't know that he even needs to show out because I don't know how many reps he's going to get. Like, I would assume he'll get reps, but how many would he get with Goff in the preseason? Does Goff even play in the preseason? Because if Goff doesn't play in the preseason, maybe they go to Patrick for like a drive or 2, but like how much can he hurt himself? Like, I don't really know. Like, I feel like he put himself in such a good spot last year. In terms of the bubble, this is a really tough group to touch into because you're going to have to jump like a legitimate – you're either going to have to jump a draft pick or two legitimate pieces that feel like they're in a really strong spot to make this team. Like, it's going to be hard for these guys to drop off the roster in Patrick and Raymond. So that's Ronnie Bell, Tom Kennedy, Malik Taylor, who was a tryout addition, Kenny James, and Meeks from Syracuse. I'm going to go to a player that hasn't gotten a lot of talk, and I want to just give a slight attention to a receiver in Malik Taylor, who, again, we haven't really seen since 2023. We saw him with the Jets, but the intriguing background to me with Taylor is actually the process of him getting to where he is, in the sense of Taylor had a real shot to make the team in 2024 before he hit IR in August and was knocked out for the year. Now, he didn't have like crazy production in the preseason, but the idea was like, okay, this guy might make the team. He was dominant in training camp in 2024 for the Jets. Again, before hitting IR in 2023, we saw him in the preseason. 2024, he was dominant in training camp. The lead up was really good. He seemed to have a strong connection with Rodgers, as messy as that whole situation was. And when I look at him, when you think about the size, he's not a small receiver, but he shows the foot quickness. He shows some bend to his game. We'll have to see what the hands look like. A lot of that is in question. This vertical play over top, got off the line pretty well, tracked it, made a big play over top. I think the movement skills look very noticeable. I just wonder, like, how consistent is he as a pass catcher? But the Lions saw something. I mean, amongst everybody that competing, they had him in for a trial, and it's like, oh, this guy, 29 years old, let's bring him in. We want to put him in the mix with all these guys. So maybe this is one where, like, best case scenario is he looks really good. He can't make the team, but they would love to keep him around on the practice squad just to know if we ever have to go that direction, we did trust him. Like, that kind of feels like what he's fighting for is potentially week 9 during the season. You need somebody, so you just bring him back and you throw him in the lineup for a few snaps because that's what you need. I don't know, like, if he's really competing for a big-time special team spot. We know that's what you have to do, but I don't know that that's what that is. I think Ronnie Bell finds himself in a similar category to Taylor in that sense. Same thing with Kennedy. Like, which one of these guys, if all of them can, like, prove, like, all right, if you had to come back to something, if you had to add somebody back, if you needed a little bit more, during the year, maybe something pops up, who could you count on? I think those three guys are all in that same competition. Like, I don't really see a great path for any of them making the team. I think if somebody does have a path, it's Taylor and Bell. Maybe even more so Taylor because of his veteran experience, that he would be able to connect faster with Goff. I don't think any of them are making the team. I don't see a great shot. I mean, less than 5% for all of them. I don't think that any of them have a great shot. And we know what Tom Kennedy is, so, you just keep bringing him in because Kennedy seems to just push everybody, and it just works, so why not? And then you got the two UDFAs, which, again, maybe not a great opportunity, but maybe one of them shines, and they upend a draft pick and love it. I mean, maybe. I mean, it could be, again, kind of the practice squad thing, and that's just time for development. Who actually has it? Who has something? I tend to like and lean towards Kenny James. I think he's been – I mean, every clip that we've seen has been fun. He's had a lot of fun plays at this point, and on top of that, Kenny James – in college for UMass was big against everybody that was good. He was big there. Meeks seems like he could have some real red zone presence. I just wonder if that's going to connect, but if it does, like if you're a reliable piece in the end zone, we've always looked for guys that can do that. Anybody that makes that work works. Josh Reynolds was good there immediately. Tim Patrick was able to add that as time kind of went on. It's like, oh, this guy's really good in the red zone. I think anybody that can find a way to be consistent there, Quintez Cephas had some of that to him. That guy tends to work. So maybe that's where he can kind of stand out and separate himself. But overall here, I think the first 6 are really going to be tough to upend. It's just how many do they keep? I think that's the real battle. It's not as much of, them battling maybe amongst each other as much as it is them just battling for roster numbers at this point. So those are the 3 battles that I wanted to hit on today. We'll leave it there. This is a lot of fun. I want to hit on a couple of more of your guys' stuff before we get out of here. Too many guys that are same player on D-line, can't rush a pass, or solid run defender. All right, so let's go to the D-line real quick. We'll hit on a couple of these before we get out of here. So I would say between the locks, the Lions have when I made this case earlier, and I know we did a defense fine video, I don't know when we did it a long time ago, of guys that I consider are plus players in both categories, right? These were guys that legitimately brought plus value as both a run defender and as a pass rusher that we know. I would include Tyleek, but we don't have to because he's a rookie. Hutchinson is that. DJ Reader is that. Aleem is that. We just don't know because of the injury. Davenport is that. Levi is that. Roy Lopez, I would say, is that, especially based on his position. All right. Now, if you consider him a DN, then no. But as an interior D player, I would say he is that. Ahmed, I won't consider in that group. I would say even Wingo has a case, but I won't throw him in there because it wasn't enough last year. But Wingo has a potential to be there. So I think within the locks, they have almost everybody listed there falls into a category where they can get after it. That's why, to me, Muhammad has a real shot to separate himself, as well as Miles Adams, because those are 2 guys that bring legitimate juice as rushers that we've already seen in the NFL. Like, Muhammad showed it all last year, just overall production. And then he got better against the run. Adams, on the other hand, showed it from the inside, which is tough to find. So I think those two guys can have a real opportunity to separate themselves. Pascal's opportunity to separate himself is from the interior. That's always what they wanted to do with him. They didn't get a shot to do that last year. They were just killed with injuries. They left him at DN. It didn't happen. This year, I expected to take a big jump. If he can find it, remember last year's preseason, a lot of interior work. That's how that's going to come across. That's how it has to come across. And he's got to be, to me, pretty darn dominant as an interior player this year heading into that. Outside of that, though, you get to the kind of that bubble group, and that's where the problem is. Like, that's why I said, can Agude find a consistent go-to move? At least with Muhammad, he has a couple moves that he can go to, but he's got about three. He's got about three rush moves that I can count. Agude's got about one, but it's just like, well, can this be more consistent, right? That's kind of where I'm at. Nate Lynn. I just need to see more of Nate Lynn. He was really good in one preseason game. That's where all these guys are kind of in that same battle of competition there. And then Keith Cooper as well, much more of a power player, kind of an effort pass rush piece that can run down guys, plays really good run to pass transitions, but does he have ways to actually consistently win? That's a real question. So I feel pretty good about the D-line. We just know most of its health, and because most of its health, Muhammad and Miles Adams, to me, are the two that I would circle as a real shot to kind of upset things and find their way onto the 53 because both of them can do that. So I tend to agree with that being the case. So, yeah, I guess we'll leave that there, man. I appreciate y'all joining. I will see you guys on Wednesday. We'll pick this up next on Wednesday. Our position groups that I'm planning to go through, we can change this up. But right now, the plan for position groups, let me check my notes, see what I have here. We are going to go to, give me 1 second. Next Wednesday, we're going to go to secondary and tight ends. We got to talk about this tight end battle at the back end, and we're going to go through the entire secondary. And then finally, we can wrap it up with offensive line / quarterbacks. I don't think quarterback will take that long, but offensive line will. I want to give that essentially its own show. So stay tuned for that. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Appreciate y'all joining. I will see y'all then. Have a great Monday, and I'm out. I'm out, y'all. I'll see y'all over here on YouTube, man. Appreciate y'all joining. We'll be back soon. I got to head out, though. Appreciate y'all, man.